Okay, so I think we'll get started. So welcome everyone to the latest installment on the Dental Access webinar series, 3D Printing for Permanent Digital Applications. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're going to be taking Q&A at the end of the presentation, time permits. So if everyone could just enter their question in the Q&A chat at the bottom of the screen, that would be fantastic, and we'll be able to get to those questions at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Belinda Muggleton, and I'm a co-founder of Dental Access, and I welcome everyone online this evening. So we still have quite a few people logging on. So this has been a very well-attended webinar. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in the 3D printing space for digital dentistry. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Andrew Ip. Andrew Ip is a general dentist. He works in a private practice in Marsfield and in Parramatta in Sydney. He completed his membership in general dental practice with the Royal Australian College of Dental Surgeons in 2017 and a graduate of the Diploma of Orthodontics at James Cook University in 2019. He's currently undergoing a Master of Science in Implantology and Dental Surgery and a Graduate Diploma of Digital Dentistry. Andrew is a member of the Australian Osseointegration Society and the International Team for Implantology. Now, Andrew's had a long standing interest in 3D printing. So basically started out as a hobbyist, has 3D printed all sorts of things, and I know he'll show some interesting early works outside of dentistry during his presentation, but he's now been, he's applied his 3D printing interest and experience to his dental practice. So tonight, Andrew's going to be talking about the tips, the tricks, the pitfalls, what he's found works, doesn't work in 3D printing. And it's going to be a very practical presentation. So he'll also be showing some cases. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand you over to Dr. Andrew Ip. Welcome, Andrew.
Good evening, everyone, or wherever you're in the world. If you're on lockdown like me, thanks for joining in. Hopefully you get something out of today's talk. So without further ado, let's start. All right. Okay. Well, just to show you a couple of photos of what I've done in the past. Just to introduce myself, I used to do 3D printing as a hobby. So I didn't one day just go, oh, let's print temporary crowns, or let's print splints, or let's print models. All of a sudden, I was printing things very different to what you'll see today. And the aim today is basically we're going to get from a hobbyist kind of like perspective where I came from to something like this. All right, so the model is printed in the Asiga dental model, and those temporary crowns, they're printed in, I think they're in Nextent crown and bridge micro hybrid, microfiber hybrid. So yeah, we'll go through that later. So what are we going to go through? Basically, we're going to go through how I started into 3D printing, the printers that I've used, the various materials I've used, how to correctly process those materials, because like our composite resin that we use for our fillings, you cannot simply just whack it in and hope that it will work. You need to make sure it's set, especially for biocompatible resins. You've got to make sure that it's set correctly, because patients are going to be wearing these things or having these things in their mouths for extended periods of time. So that's really important. We're going to go through certain elements of design, and I use Xplan, which is my preferred aligner treatment planning service that I use, and I'll go through that later. We're going to go through some clinical workflow processes, some traps, pitfalls, things like that, and I'm going to go through a couple of cases. So hopefully you all find it a little bit interesting. All right. So how did I start? I guess I started 3D printing as a hobby. I never really got into the filament side of things. I basically started from resin 3D printing, and essentially I taught myself through YouTube videos, Facebook groups, things like that. So there's a lot of information on the internet, and be that a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, so basically I taught myself how to print, and basically it expanded from there. Certain channels that I would recommend for people who want to get into 3D printing, Nerdtronic 3D Printing Pro. They're kind of like more hobby side of things, but they're still extremely valuable channels that I would recommend to anyone interested in 3D printing, because they have lots of videos on how to support your models, how to handle resins safely, and yeah, a lot of great information on those. For more specifically dental stuff, Baron Gruder is the one that I would strongly recommend. There's a lot of great info on his YouTube channel that I would strongly recommend. And I would, if you're going to get into 3D printing, I'd start off small. Like, don't be so ambitious. Okay, start off printing models, things like that, and then you would be able to kind of like diversify. But you'd probably want a printer that can do simple stuff, but also be able to do more things, or print more things, or have validated processes for different types of resins. So I'll talk about printers in a sec. So yeah, we'll talk about that. And from my opinion, I mean, it's easy from my perspective, because I started off printing as a hobby, where some of these models require very intricate detailing. Honestly, dentistry, the 3D printing for dentistry is quite straightforward and quite predictable, actually, especially when you compare it to printing miniatures like on this top right-hand side, where you've got overhangs and little bits and pieces all over the place. So that's hard. A dental model is pretty easy in comparison. So 3D printers. There's generally 3 types of 3D printers. Your basic type is your LCD 3D printer. Essentially, all 3D printers work in the same fashion, where you have a light source and your resin, which is UV light cured. All right? And essentially, you have this light source that cures in certain areas, and incrementally, or they should, I guess, say additively, builds a product up from layers and layers and layers and layers. All right, so here you've got your Frozen Sonic and your Sonic Mini, I should say, and then your Sonic Mini 4K, and then on the right-hand side you've got the Epax X1, and they're all very good printers. But of course, if you want to move up, you've got SLA printers. They basically kind of like you're using a laser. Essentially, you're still using light to cure layers, essentially. And then as you move further up, you got DLP. So you got printers like Splint Ray, you got the Asiga, and these printers are very accurate. They can be quite fast, and they're more specifically geared towards certain industries like dental, because of their accuracy and their reliability. And essentially, kind of like as you kind of like move up, the more kind of like, I guess in a way, the more money you chuck at it, the more predictable your prints will be, and the more, I guess, validated your processes should be, because these printers like the Asiga and the Splint Ray, they all have validated processes. So kind of like if you follow the instructions, you know basically what you're going to get. And you see all these printers that you see on the screen, I've owned all of them. Okay, I've used all of them. So I've owned at least 6, 7, potentially 8 soon printers. So I kind of know how they all work, and they all will work. You just have to really know what you want in a printer and what you want to get out of it. That's really important. So the next kind of part, when you print something, you're going to need to wash it, all right? And you're going to need to wash it in certain materials, in certain, I guess, fluids. And the most common type, or what I would recommend, is what we call 99% IPA, which is isopropyl alcohol. And basically, there's all different things that you can clean your prints with. Your most basic options are Tupperware, and you can get a magnetic stirrer from Amazon or eBay. Look, it's cheap, it does the job. It is messy, all right? But that being said, you will always need some Tupperware filled with IPA. You'll just always need it, especially for your pre-rinse. Yeah, you'll always need some clear containers with alcohol in it. And you can get them on sale very cheap at once. I never buy it unless it's on sale. It's basically on sale like usually half of the year's on sale. So yeah, you can get it cheap at Woolies. Next step, you can get some professional cure units. So this is the foam wash. It's more of a set and forget. So it's a relatively automated system. You put your freshly printed objects on the top. You press a button. It'll sink it down into a bucket, basically, an 8-liter bucket of IPA. And then you can choose the time it takes to wash. And once it's done, that bucket will, well, basically your objects will be raised up and basically everything will be air dried. And it's a great unit, don't get me wrong. But when you try to delegate, because eventually you probably want to delegate some of these tasks to your staff, carrying 8 liters of IPA is quite heavy, all right? Maybe not for you, but for your staff members, it can be quite heavy, and it will slosh around. It can be quite messy. So you just have to keep that in mind. But overall, it's quite a good unit. Then if you move up in the world, you kind of like have the Sprint Ray kind of like wash unit. Now this is a very big unit. If you have space, then you can consider something like this. But I mean, look, it is, you do get what you pay for. It's very easy for you to exchange the fluids. It's very easy for you to clean, but it is quite an expensive kind of like option. It does require a lot of bench space, and it is very noisy. It is very noisy. So it is also something for you to consider. Finally, I like this unit. It's the Anycubic wash and cure unit. It is very affordable. It's about 200 Australian each unit. Does the job well. Basically, there's a basket. You chuck your stuff inside, you sink it in, and there's a magnetic kind of like a fan that stirs everything up. And it's very easy to get different buckets for different purposes, and you can exchange them in and out. It's quite easy to use, but you just have to consider that even though it is a wash and cure unit, I will personally never use it as a cure unit, because the cure function is simply, just to put it simply, it's a joke. You would only use it as a wash unit. So I would recommend that if you are starting off in 3D printing, I'd go for the Anycubic units. And then if you want to move up in the world, the foam wash is quite a good unit too. But they all do the job. Then after you've washed your unit, you need to cure it, just like you light cure your composites. You need to cure it. And you basically, most people start off with a very basic, almost like a nail varnish cure unit, which is cheap. You can't really put a lot of things in it. And you can probably do your nails at the same time. It's the same type of thing. Basically, it will have LED bulbs inside that will cure your object, essentially. It's not very accurate, but it will do the job for demo models. So that's basically what most people start off with. Then you can move up and you can choose kind of like a proper cure unit. Now this is the frozen cure. I would never really use it for biocompatible resins. You really do want a validated cure unit for something like that. But it's more than adequate for study models and things like that. So it's pretty cheap, and essentially there's a turntable inside. It will spin around, and there's some LED lights around, and you can choose the time for it to cure, but there's no heating function in there. Okay, some of these biocompatible resins you will need heat to cure. Okay, so then we move up to some more expensive units. Now this is the Form Cure. It is quite pricey, all right, but it does have temperature and time control. It does have a large chamber, and it works pretty well. Most people like it because it's easy to use, it's easy to delegate. It's pretty foolproof, to be honest. So it's quite a good unit. I would always recommend something like this. For my biocompatible units, though, I use the Auto Flash. Now, this is a very expensive unit. It can be, well, with the nitrogen attachment, I think it's around $4,800 or something like that. It is quite expensive, but if you are considering biocompatible resins, this is probably your gold standard. It does have an optional nitrogen gas attachment, which if you want to kind of like cure without that oxygen inhibited layer, that's kind of like what you want. Otherwise, you can cure in glycerin, and if you're even cheaper or more of a cheapsate, you can cure in water. But the nitrogen attachment is there for you. Okay. Now, one thing that I have to consider, you would have to consider, is that this chamber is very small. Okay, you really would only be able to fit one study model in it per time, or one surgical guide, or a couple of crowns. So it's not really for bulk curing. You'd pretty much want a Form Cure or another kind of like curing unit, which has a larger chamber for your study models, especially if you're doing aligner work. Because you're going to be curing multiple units at a time, and to cure one model at a time is just a waste of time. Okay, so some more useful stuff that I've kind of like gathered kind of on the way. Now, this is a really great product. It's called the Wham Bam Slap Mat. It's basically a silicone mat that you just apply on your table. So you'll find that when you start resin printing, it can be quite messy. You will get alcohol on your table. You will get resin on your table. So instead of kind of like dirtying your table and making a mess, you can get these mats that you just place on the table. If you get spills, you basically leave it out in the sun. We're very lucky in Australia. We have quite strong UV. I mean, this is the one time the Australian sun's quite useful instead of giving you sunburn. It's actually very good at curing things. So you leave your contaminated slap mat outside for a day, and everything will be cured. Your IPA will evaporate. The residual resin will be cured, and you just peel it off and just chuck it in the bin. It's safe to chuck it once it's being cured. You can get that from an Australian company called Monocure 3D. So yeah, support Aussie. Other things that you can consider. Now, plastic razors are really good, especially if you kind of sometimes your model or your supports or your kind of like they're very strongly adhered to your print bed. Now, I use a painter's knife, which is a very flexible, thin knife, but you can use things like plastic razors to essentially wedge your prints apart from your print bed. And the advantage of these plastic razors is that they won't scratch, or they won't indent, or they won't damage your print bed. So they're really great. You can get I can get one of these for about $20 plus 100 razors on Amazon. And yeah, it's a really good idea. So that's something that I would strongly recommend. Now, IPA. This is really important. I use IPA because it's quite easy to get in Australia at high concentrations. There's a company called Sydney Solvents where you can get IPA at varying volumes. And I would recommend that you wash your IPA, your resin prints in IPA. Now, you can get it in 20-liter canisters or tanks. I have done so. It is really hard to carry around a 20-liter tank, let alone your staff. So of course it is cheaper if you buy it in 20 liters, but honestly, if you're going to be, cycling through your IPA, it's just easier to get the 5-liter bottles, and you're not really saving that much. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. You can buy, IPA from eBay, but you really don't know what you're going to get. So yeah, I'd recommend these guys, Sydney Solvers. They do deliver interstate as well. And so for your small prints, you'll find that especially in these big kind of like wash units, they'll kind of like sift through the little grates and grills. So you get these tea strainers to hold your small crowns in pieces. You can get them for cheapest chips. I know I got mine for less than $5 from Daiso. And you just chuck those small little pieces that you want to wash inside the tea strainers, and then you chuck the whole thing inside the wash unit, and you know that it's not going to sift through, and you're not going to be digging around contaminated IPA, looking for your kind of like your small little temporary crown or temporary bridge that you've printed out. Okay, so more useful stuff. Now with resin printing, you will find that you will kind of like there will be fumes around the place. Now, some people are acutely sensitive to them, other people not so much. I would recommend that you get some air purifiers. Now, these are Elegoo air purifiers. Honestly, I don't know how well they work, but I mean, I guess it's better than nothing. They're small ones that you can actually put inside kind of like the printer chamber while it's operating, and they're USB charged, and you just change the carbon filters once in a while. It's a good idea. It gets rid of some of the fumes and yeah, some of the headaches that are associated with them. Now, if you are curing any biocompatible resins, you really want to make sure that you don't have that oxygen inhibited layer. So ideally glycerin, which you can get from KY jelly or any water-based lubricant. If you're cheap, you can cure in water, but I mean glycerin is pretty easy to get. Yeah, if you do get them from Woolies, unfortunately they don't come in big kind of like vessels. So when you buy 5 packs of lube, you might get funny looks, and I have had funny looks given to me before from my patient, unfortunately, who saw me buy them. Now, you will need lots of PPE. Gloves and masks, you will need them because you really do not want to handle any of these resins with your bare hands. So yeah, make sure you glove up, mask up. Don't be afraid to chuck gloves. You will burn through them. Unfortunately, it is part and parcel of resin printing. But if you're going to be doing this for a long period of time, really, the PPE is just a small expense for your own safety and for your own long-term operation of these resins or these printers, I should say. Because the last thing that you want is for you to develop some sort of allergy or reaction to it, and then it's basically game over. Other things for you to consider: funnels. Get funnels, lots of funnels, because when you strain your resin back into your bottles, you will need these funnels so that all the cured bits and small bits and pieces, they get trapped and they don't enter your bottle. Okay, they're cheap as chips. Yeah, Amazon is your friend here. Okay, so let's start on some simple cases, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about Ceramco Ground Tech, which is a very interesting product. I guess in a way it can be quite controversial as well because people aren't used to printing crowns. It is, I guess, marketed as a permanent crown resin. Whether or not it is or will be, well, we shall find out. But basically, it has a similar strength to composite resin. And if people have milled before, it's similar strength to enamic, okay? So I would consider them more or less a long-term temporary and a semi-permanent option. I have placed quite a lot in the past 12 months. And to this date, I've really only had one DMOD, which honestly, I was probably biting off more than I can chew. And then I have had one denture-based fracture. But funnily enough, the tooth in that the teeth in that denture, they didn't actually fracture. It was actually the denture base that fractured. So I would strongly suggest, if you are dipping your toes into a material like this, please be very careful with your case selection and do not oversell this product. Do not overpromise this product. Do not promise the world that, do not tell your parents, well, simply, you cannot compare zirconia to a material like this. And yeah, but patients have to be informed. It is an option. It is not going to be suitable in all cases, but it is an option. It's very color stable, and I feel that it's probably because when you cure it outside the mouth and you cure it correctly, it is very color stable, and it comes in a whole range of shades from A3.5, some of the D shades, all up to the snow white shade, which is a very white shade. Now, when I started printing this resin, it was I had so many failures and I burned through a lot of material, but basically you really want to orientate them properly. And I'll show you a couple of pictures later. So basically you would, in terms of the workflow, it's similar to how you would design a crown, or if you're going to mill a crown, you're going to be preparing your tooth, you're going to scan it with an intraoral scanner, and you're going to design in whatever design software you're going to use, okay? Then you're going to print it, you're going to wash it, and then and cure it, and then you're going to characterize it, okay? All right, so design on Exocad. Now, I'm not a designer. I'm sure a technician or someone else can design better, but this is a simple case where a patient wanted some veneers to kind of mask some discoloration on her teeth. You can outsource the design if you want. There are now design services out there in the world. I'm sure in Australia as well. The dimensions that you really want would be similar to Emax, okay? So those are your parameters that you really want to keep. All right, and you're going to print it, okay? You're going to want to orientate them vertically with the incisal edge towards that print plate as pictured, okay? And you're going to be printing at around 50 microns. You're going to really be as I said, you're going to orientate them vertically with the incisal edge or occlusal surface facing that print bed. And one thing that I would say is that you shouldn't overfill the vat, because these resins are quite pricey, okay? And the more you do, you're going to end up with excess kind of flowing on top of that print bed, and then you're going to have to wipe it off, and inevitably you're going to waste some, okay? So this stuff is liquid gold, so you really don't want to waste it. That being said, it's a very thick type of resin, okay? And thick resins are harder to print, and you need a bit more of a delay for kind of, basically your print bed will go up and down incrementally. And when it goes up, the resin is going to flow back. And sometimes if you don't fill it enough, you do not have enough resin at the base of your print, like your vat, and then your printer is not going to detect that resin, and you're going to get a print failure, basically. So it's a fine balance between overfilling and underfilling. All right. You can leave the supports when you're removing, and especially if you're polishing, as I've shown here, they make for great handles, so you're not touching the crown, and especially if you're printing veneers, it can be quite fiddly, okay? One thing that printing veneers and crowns has taught me is that, and I'm sure if you mill your own stuff as well, it's probably taught you the same thing, but when you become your own technician, you really appreciate what work and how much effort your technicians actually, the work they put into doing your work, all right? And another tip is that when you start, print more than one of the same unit. If you're printing a crown, okay, print 2 of the same object, because you inevitably you'll drop it, or you'll break something, or you'll do something, and at least you'll have another of the same unit to work with. When you're more confident, then you don't need to do something like that. But at the start, I would strongly recommend doing something like that. You're really not going to be wasting that much resin, and especially at the start when you are going to be more prone to failures, having something extra is always going to be very valuable. Okay, so you're going to be wanting to wash these really, really well. Now, this is basically, I wash it in basically an ultrasonic bath that I got from J-Car. It's not the strongest unit, but you can get stronger dental units. I probably would upgrade to a dental ultrasonic because it will be stronger. And I personally I know there are people who fill their ultrasonic baths with IPA. Well, IPA is a very volatile fluid. Okay, it's very flammable. Any spark and it will light up. Okay, so I would never. You don't want to be that dentist who sets fire to their practice. To be honest, it's not worth the risk. It's much simpler for you to, as I've done here, you put your stuff in a jar and they fill that jar halfway or a third way with IPA, and then you put that jar in an ultrasonic that's been filled with water. Much safer. You're not going to be wasting that much IPA, and yeah, that's the way to go in my opinion. Okay, someone else may say, oh, fill the ultrasonic bath in IPA. I personally wouldn't do it. I wouldn't take the risk, to be honest. And you're going to get this white frosty surface immediately when you wash it correctly. Okay, that's the picture on your left. And when you polish it, you're going to get the picture on your right. It's going to appear like that once you polish it and cure it. Okay, don't worry, when it's first printed, it's not going to be the color that you want, but once you cure it correctly, it will be the color that you want. And it's about 2 times 2,000 flashes on the auto flash. So that's about, yeah, it's very quick to cure on the auto flash. The auto flash cures really fast. Now, you're going to polish really with composite resin and the discs. So softless discs. And then you're going to glaze it with Optiglaze, which I feel currently in Australia is probably the best product that you can get. The only thing that I would warn people is that it will yellow under a certain wavelength. So you should probably test Optiglaze. What I've done is basically you can, on some paper, you can put a drop of the Optiglaze that you want to use, the color that you want to use, and then you cure it. You cure it under how you would cure it. So most people will cure it. Some of the Velo light cure can cure it for about, if you zap it for about 40 seconds. Otherwise, you can cure it in the auto flash for like 100 flashes. And then you'll actually see the color difference that you'll get, the eventual color difference. So you've got to be careful not to overcure, because if you overcure, you will basically yellow your stain. And then, yeah, you finally cure it underwater or your water glaze. So this is basically the start. You polish it, so you get this kind of like smooth matte finish. And then once you polish it, that's basically the result that you're looking for. Okay, so it's a very simple thing to post-process. And the results. Now, you're not going to get results that are going to be reflective of, Emax or something very translucent. The one thing I will say is that these materials can be quite opaque. You will get a decent result, okay? And patients will be generally happy. But I mean, you do get a bit of an opaque-ish result, okay? Now, I'm not a style Italian dentist. I will not have fancy photos with, wonderful lipstick or whatever not, but this is day-to-day stuff, okay? It's not fancy. It will do the job. It's better than what it was before. Of course, yes, you can get a better result with, a translucent zirconia or an Emax, but for the price that the patient pays, they're happy, and if they're happy, I'm happy. Okay, so it's not a bad product. Okay, but once again, I would strongly suggest case selection. Really important. Don't overpromise. And you can use it for dentures. All right. Basically, there's a separate denture base material, and then you have the crown material. You're going to glue them together with the denture base material, and then you're going to cure the whole thing in one piece. And then you can glaze it, and that's basically what you get. All right. I would still be a bit iffy doing it for full dentures. I feel that the material the base material is never going to be as strong as acrylic. So once again, be careful with your case selection. Don't do it on the grinder. I have, admittedly, had one denture-based fracture. So take that, from that what you will. Okay, aligners. Now, this is a whole, there's so many ways you can do it. You can design the liners with certain software. There's so many different options out there now. And really, especially with the DIY market popping up now in Australia, if you are doing aligners, there's really, if you have a 3D printer and your biomechanics are pretty good, there's no reason why you can't do it yourself. You're going to save some of that, in aligner lab fee, and you can pass that saving onto the patients. Okay, but it is quite a lot of work, so a lot of it is delegation. Okay, I use Xplan. I have used programs to design myself, and for simple cases, I still do it myself. But because I am relatively time poor because of my extracurricular study, I do use this service. It's very affordable, to be honest, and it does simplify things for me. Okay, so basically, once again, with any aligner treatment, you're going to need to take your your records and your X-rays and all of that, and you're going to submit your prescription, and you're going to get back a plan. You will almost definitely need to revise that plan, unfortunately, but that's a good thing. I mean, it keeps you on your toes. You really cannot rely on someone else to do your own planning. And then you're going to be able to, well, the good thing about Xplan is that it will give you an option to basically get all your models ready, print ready, and ready to go in one hit. Okay, so once the treatment plan's approved, it's really simple. It just saves you a lot of time, printing essentially, because you don't have all of that pre-printing setup that a lot of times you have to do. And then you're going to pressure form. Now, I prefer pressure forming over vacuum forming. Vacuum forming is probably not going to be, you're not going to get that nice marginal adaptation with vacuum forming. So I use the Ministar. So you really want to pressure form them. And then it's a very arduous task, but you're going to need to basically cut your aligners. There are machines out there that will cut them for you, but they're not really affordable for the small general practice. So yeah, you're going to be cutting them, or more likely, you're going to be your assistants are going to be cutting them for you. So there are lots of aligner sheets available. I use Tagless. It's about $5 per sheet, so it's on the pricier end of the spectrum. But the good thing about Tagless is that it does have on each side, it does have a kind of like a protective coat that you peel off, so you don't need to put the separator on your models. You can thermoform straight onto the models. There's just no extra step, no extra mess. It's definitely worth the time saving. Now, when you heat your machine, because with the Ministar, well, obviously there's some sort of heating element. I usually do an empty run first to heat up the machine before you do your thermoforming. And when you do heat up, once it's heated up, take 5 seconds off the recommended time. So with Tagless, I think it's about 25 seconds, but I do mine at 20 seconds after it's heated up, because you'll find that that extra 5 seconds, you probably will overheat your sheets a little bit for some brands. And don't make more than 10 pairs of aligners at a time, because if you're going to need refinements or scan, you're going to need to kind of like remake those aligners. So you really don't want to make 50 aligners and find out, oh, I need to remake half of them because I need to do a refinement at a certain stage. Start off simple, but charge for your time is quite labor intensive. Okay, so this is a simple video on basically what software looks like. Okay, basically it's quite similar. Now these are not final attachments. Do not follow this is just a demonstration of what the software looks like. Okay, this is definitely not how I would approach this case, but just to give you an idea of what your treatment will look like on the software. That's basically what it will look like. It will show you kind of like when you get to that final liner, kind of like how much movement Sorry. Okay, I think we're back. All right. Let's. All right. Okay, so wait, wait. Yeah. Okay. So basically, it will give you a whole list of aligners, or the models, I should say, for you to choose and print. The beautiful thing about it, as you'll see, you'll get to choose whether you want to hollow your models. You'll choose whether you want to nest your models, or whether you want to put it all in the one print bed, or print beds. You're going to be able to choose your printer as well. And so I'm printing on the Asiga MAX in this situation. So it's a very useful option to have. It just saves you so much time preparing them each individual model. Okay. All right, so with your aligners, there's some things that you're going to want. Obviously, you're going to need scissors because most of it is going to be cutting. Don't bother getting expensive scissors. Get cheap ones that you can get from Hobbyco or any craft shop because they're about 20 bucks. So about 10% of what you would usually pay. And when they're blunt, you just bin them, okay? It's just plastic that you're cutting. Sometimes this is a very useful thing to have, an ultrasonic cutter. It's much safer to use than those metal discs that you can use. So I have used metal discs in the past, and every time I use it, I'm kind of like holding my breath. This is much safer for you to use. It's about 600 bucks on Amazon. Comes with like a load of blades, and it's very hard for you to cut yourself with it. So if you're gonna be delegating this task to your staff, yeah, I would prefer this over the discs, but look, everyone has their personal preference. And then you can use different bags. You can use Mylar. These are Mylar sealable bags. It just makes your presentation a bit more, professional. And they're pretty cheap as well. And you can label them. They're very cheap. You can get them on Amazon. As I said, a lot of stuff you can get from Amazon. Yeah, not from. It's quite straightforward. Okay. Okay, and this is kind of like your fancy shot of how you can stack X amount of aligners on aligner models on your printer. This is printed on the UniZ/2, but honestly, you really want to have a printer with a large print bed, because that will mean that obviously larger print bed, more models you can print. But there's nothing wrong with printing on an Asiga or something which has a smaller volume. Okay. And then after that, you're going to thermoform. Okay, let's talk about splints. Now, there's many resins options out there, and really, I've used a lot. I still go back to Key Splint Soft. It's a very good material. I really like it. My patients love it. It kind of feels like a hard soft splint, so it does feel quite hard, but it does have that flexibility. Okay. What I would recommend is when you do take your bites for the splints, you use a leaf gauge, or if you're cheap, you can use a bit of putty at the front, and you do your scan with that open bite. When you start taking, opening up bites in software, that's where you can get a bit funny, because the software will only do it based on, what 90 or 99% of the population, how they open up the bite. But yeah, if you take it, an open bite or a frenetic bite, or however you want to take your bite in, and you do your scan with that bite in that position, that's really what you're going to get. Okay. Now, Keysmith Soft has, some people. I have had quite a lot of failures with this print, but as I've used it more and more, now I barely get any failures. But at the start, it can be quite a difficult resin to print with. You really want to print it almost vertical, but at a slight angle with the anterior section kind of like closest to the print bed. So I'll show you a picture later of how I would orientate it. And one thing that I will say is that it can be quite challenging to clean, you really want to clean it in an ultrasonic, and you will need to scrub it. So I use a kid's toothbrush to scrub it, and yeah, you really want it nice and clean before you cure it. And this is just a video of I'm using D3 Splint in this kind of like situation. It's a very affordable program. It's about $750, one-off, no subscription or license fees, and it's very easy for you to use. You can just see it's very kind of like it's quite. It will go through the steps basically. So I'm just going to let that run basically. The video is about 2 minutes, and this was actually the second time I'd used D3 Splint. Now the speed of this video, it's been sped up about 4 times. So it took me about 10 minutes to design this splint, and that was my second run. So obviously, as I'm more familiar with the software, it'll take me kind of like even shorter. Of course, you can use Exocad or 3Shape or whatever software you use, but if you're just starting out, you don't have any design software, this is something that I would strongly recommend, this software, because it's very easy for you to use, and you really can't go wrong. So yeah, I'll just let that run and catch my breath a little bit. And of course, you can choose your offset. You can choose how much, your undercut settings and all of that. That's all up to you. It can be a bit of trial and error. Some dentists want it tighter, they want their splints tighter. Other dentists want them a little bit looser. So it can be a bit of trial and error. Okay. Now this is just a flat plane. Of course, if you want a Michigan style splint, they have also different options for those. Okay, but this is just a very simple flat plane that will be, you can use for most cases. Okay. I'm just going to show basically some automated movements, simulating kind of like jaw movements essentially. Now I'll put a raft in there and you'll see why later. You can use supports, but a raft will print much more predictably. And I'm going to finalize it, and then that's it. Okay. So as I said, that's about 2 minutes 20, the video times 4. So it took me about 10 minutes to design that splint. And that was on my second run. And that was after watching a 20-minute YouTube video on how to do it. So it's very easy. All right, and that's how I orientate it. At an angle, kind of like almost vertically, the raft is touching the build plate, and that raft is basically going to provide a good amount of surface area for the print to stick. Okay, you can use supports. There's a bit more polishing involved, but there's nothing wrong with using supports. I do find that it is much more predictable printing with a raft compared to with supports. Okay. And you just polish it after you cure it with a simple acrylic burr and some pumice. You don't really need to make it gloss. You can make it a gloss finish, but honestly, if your patients are asking for a gloss finish, don't bother, because you're going to want a gloss finish all the time. It's perfectly tolerable when it's smooth and pumiced. So really, I don't see why you want to achieve a gloss finish unless it's for your ego, really. Okay, guided surgery. You can go for sleeveless and sleeved options. There are a lot of options once again out there. I am pretty cheap, so I use Blue Sky Plan, and that basically equates to about $50 Australian per export. You can get a lab to design and make it for you. I know there are labs charging $250 upwards. Some labs charge like $500. So honestly, at the end of the day, you're responsible. If you can do it yourself, why not? And you're saving yourself a decent amount of money. You really can't go wrong with Nextent. There are other kind of like surgical guide resins out there, but really, I've never needed to change. I'm not saying that others don't work, but yeah, I find Next Step Surgical Guide to be good, but there's a lot out there. So it's going to print out like this. It's going to be yellow at the start. You're going to cure it. It's going to be even more yellow. All right. And then if you're going to be curing, if you're going to be using a sleeved option, I would recommend curing with the sleeve inside. Okay. And then once you autoclave it, it's got to be nice and clear. All right. So this is Blue Sky Plan. I'm just going to play a quick video, and I just added a cat there just to spice things up. And I'm not an implantologist, okay? So look, you can critique my implant work, but I'm just showing you what the software looks like, okay? So obviously you'll have a DICOM of your CBCT. You'll have an STL of your, the arch that you want to put an implant in, and you're going to match them up together. You're going to mingle them together. And then if based on the system, you're going to choose the size of the implant, your drill system, all of that stuff. And the one thing that I would say is that because you're in control and you're controlling it, you're responsible, okay? You can't shift the blame on anyone else. You put crap in, you're going to get crap out, okay? So that's my one caveat, okay? All right. So you're going to print at 100 microns. You really don't need, of course, you can print at 50 microns, but I don't feel that you're going to need that extra accuracy. Never print the guide with the supports facing that fitting surface, okay? Because it's not going to fit. You're going to, when you remove supports, you're going to leave these dimples and bits and pieces that aren't going to fit. So yeah, upside down. And you're going to need to remove the supports around that sleeve tube. Now, with the default settings on the Asiga, I've removed the supports, as you can see, around that collar. I've never needed to re-add them, and they printed out fine. Okay, so it's very predictable. And that's the advantage of using an Asiga, because it has a whole list of resins that are validated with all the correct support settings and all of that stuff. You don't need to really worry about that too much. Yeah, just basically the orientation. Okay, so you're going to print it, you post-cure it, and autoclave it. And once you autoclave it, it's going to be clear. And then you can do flapless surgery, the flapless guided kit, and the results. Yep, here and here. All right. So I would suggest basically what you get is basically what you put in. All right. So if you put it in wrong in the guided, in the software, you will get it wrong when it comes to the surgery. Okay. All right. So some tips. Recycling IPA. Now, the beauty about resin is that with gravity, once it cures, it will settle down to the bottom. You see, and then this is a way that you can recycle your IPA. Basically, your IPA will go clear because if you leave it out for about a week, the resin in the sun, the resin is going to cure, it's going to settle down at the bottom, and then you're going to be left with more or less pure IPA at the top. Okay, and then that's how you can reuse IPA. You don't need to chuck it out or let it evaporate after every time you use it. So you can see on this top right-hand side picture on the right, those containers. That's IPA contaminated IPA that's been left there for about a week. On the left, that's just been left there straight away, like almost for a day. Okay. So yes, recycle your IPA. It's good for the environment. And it saves you a lot of money. Now, I would not distill your IPA. I know there are people who distill it with a distiller. I have personally done it, and the reason why I no longer do it is basically my IPA. I found IPA all over the wires adjacent to a live power socket. So after that, I freaked out and I no longer distill my IPA. So yeah, that's why I don't do it. Of course, if you want to do it, you can, but I would not recommend it. It's quite risky if you don't know what you're doing. Once again, do not underfill, do not overfill. Resins are expensive. Anything in dentistry is expensive. So you really don't want to overfill your things, and but at the same time, you really don't want to underfill your tank as well. Otherwise, you will get a failed print, just like on this image on this left-hand side. I didn't put enough surgical guide resin there. And then be practical, accessorize. You'll find that when you touch things with resin, it's going to leave marks and stuff all over the place. So I put all these kind of stickable handles all over my resin, my covers and stuff like that. So I'm not touching my my covers. I'm leaving them in a pristine fashion. And yeah, and they're cheap. You can get them from Officeworks or Woolies. Yeah, it's a very simple way of keeping your printers nice and clean. For this cure unit, I put in basically a high T. It's a clear acrylic high T table or stand that I've just put in there so that I can now, instead of one level, I've got 2 levels that I can cure. All right, and I've stuck stickable mirrors all over the place so that I get that light rebounding all over the place inside that cure unit. So I know that it's better than just 3 simple LED strips. There's LED going to be, the LED lights are going to flash everywhere. All right. Now, unfortunately, most errors are usually due to operator error and file error. So, but I mean, unfortunately, there's a bit of a learning curve. For some printers, you're going to want to roughen your build plate with some sandpaper. I've never needed to do this for my Asiga, but some other printers you will have to. Okay. And if you're not sure whether you have enough supports, if in doubt, add more. One thing that I will warn newbies of is, especially when you're printing dental models, if you're printing them vertical, you won't have this issue really when you print horizontal, but when you print vertical, beware of kind of like what we call islands. So basically the areas of the model that aren't supported, okay? It's a bit hard to explain, but potentially in the future, if there's more opportunity to talk about it, yeah, probably supports. It's just a lecture by itself. Okay, and basically some other tips. Resin needs to be warmed. Now we're lucky in Australia; we're in a relatively warm country. But if you're in Canberra, in the mornings it can be bloody cold. So in some areas, you will need to warm up your resin. And for some printers, like the Asiga, it has a warming function already. But if you're using a cheap printer, you're not so lucky. So in those situations, you can use a baby bottle warmer to warm up your resins in a very safe fashion, and then you can print more predictably, okay? Printing solid versus hollow. Once again, this is a whole different topic, but basically, print hollow, you save money, but there's a risk of failure, okay? You have an increased risk of failure if you don't know what you're doing. If you print solid, it's more predictable, but you're using up more resin, okay? So that's something that you also have to consider. And Z level. So basically, your Z level, to put it in simplistic terms, your Z level is kind of your vertical plane, okay? Now, with these printers, especially for DLP printers, they can be very precise, and any certain movements, especially during transport, they can offset your Z levels or put things into chaos. So whenever you get a new printer, you really do want to calibrate that. There will be instructions to do that in the proper way. So even though a lot of printers will be like, oh, you plug it and you play it, you really want to calibrate everything first before you print, okay? And yeah, follow the instructions. That's the one thing that I would stress. And if you're going to wash your resins, your prints basically, remove the supports after, before you wash it, because if you're washing supports, you're basically contaminating your IPA quicker. So yeah, remove the supports before you wash your prints, and you'll be, you won't be contaminating, you won't be burning through your IPA as fast. And so just to conclude, some things to consider in the future, all right? So currently the state of play for aligners is that you're going to create a model or a series of models, and you're going to pressure form over on top of them. But now there are materials out there where you can actually directly print aligners. I have had the luxury of trying this material. I don't like it. It's very difficult to print. It's very messy, and it looks nice, and it feels like an aligner, but it's just very unpredictable to print currently. Okay. Soon we'll be printing our own brackets. So there's software out there that will now, you can position your brackets and then you can print them. Yeah, so that's new, and it will probably happen in the not so distant future. With our resins, right now they're quite monolithic. They only come in one shade, but you can see in this product, now this is an Italian printer, an Italian resin. You can actually choose kind of like your shades. Of course, this is all patented, and you can actually have multiple, I guess, colors in the one prosthesis. Just like you have like a multi-layered zirconia, you can actually have a multi-layered resin print. So that's exciting. And then, of course, you can actually, there's a company out there in Austria where you can actually print zirconia for implants and crowns directly. So not even in the green state, you can actually print ceramic directly. So all these pictures, I mean, these are all actually commercially available, not in Australia, but they're all commercially available right now in Europe or the US. So it's not a matter of whether something will happen or not. It is happening. It will happen. It's just whether you want to, join the bandwagon earlier and not have such a large learning curve, or you're going to wait till the technology reaches to the stage that you're comfortable with, and then have a massive, learning curve. So my recommendation is start simple. Use a decent printer that can do simple stuff, but also can do complicated stuff like the Asiga. There's other printers out there. Yeah, so it's all very exciting. So it's really quite a crazy time that we live in. All right, so yeah, so I'm just going to conclude here and move on to questions if there are any.
Okay, we'll wind up pretty quickly here, Andrew, but I do there's a couple of questions that we have received. So with regards to the wash, would you recommend buying 2 of the Anycubic to start with, or would you use Tupperware for the initial wash and a mechanical wash for the second wash? How would you approach that? Andrew, you're just on mute.
To start off with, if you're just starting off, I would get 2 of the Anycubics, or you can actually get the 1 Anycubic and just get 2 tubs. Then you just get the 1 unit, and then you just get an extra tub. You're always going to want like a 2-stage wash. All right, one is for your dirtiest wash, and then you're going to switch over to basically a less dirty wash. All right, so that's really what I would recommend. Of course, if you want something a bit fancier or you have the budget, by all means get a foam wash. But in my personal experience, the one thing that I didn't like about the foam wash is that it's actually too good. All right, it's actually not really meant for dental. It's really meant for engineering and things like that, where your prints are bigger. The dental, your prints are much smaller. Okay, and then they give you a big, large 8-liter bucket, and 8 liters of IPA is quite heavy for your dental assistants to handle. So I personally would start off with the Anycubic wash and cure units, especially if you're just dipping your toes in it. But for $200 for the unit, and then it's like an extra $30 for a bucket. It just makes sense, and you'll always use it. You'll find a use for it. That's my opinion.
Great. And just one more question here, Andrew. I think this is relating to the Splint software. What was the name of that software again?
Oh, it's D3 Splint. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think we will wind up here. I mean, of course, if anyone does have any questions or they want to reach out to Dental Access, and Andrew's very kindly included his contact details on this slide. Oh, and there's what is the name of the cat?
Oh, that's Max.
Oh, Max,
He's
okay.
very tolerant, yeah.
So I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and to thank you, Andrew, for all the tips and tricks. You know, we very seldom see or hear about all the little, I guess, the pearls and that you've offered tonight. I think, you know, some of these really simple ideas that you've had, and, you know, the things that you need to have that are really helpful and going to make your job much easier. It's been absolutely gold. If you could just go to the next slide, Andrew, that would be great. I just would like you just to obviously know that this webinar has been recorded. It will be up on our YouTube channel, so the Dental Access YouTube channel, where all of our other webinars are located. We had a very good webinar last week, and we will be having another webinar in 3 weeks' time on digital implant retained workflows. So stay up to date with us. We have a newsletter, and follow us on the social platforms. So I'd like to thank everyone again. Certainly, if you have any questions in relation to the printers, the Max UV, the resins with Ceramco, the Keystone, the Key Splint material, the Key Guide, certainly reach out to Dental Access, and obviously any of the softwares, Xplan, also with regards to the planning service. So really great to see everyone online. Thank you, and thanks again, Andrew. It's been absolutely fantastic. Good night.